Hello and welcome everybody to MoreTalk, where we are live every Thursday on LinkedIn Audio at 2 p.m. Eastern.
And at 11 a.m. Pacific in today, rainy San Diego.
And if this is one of your first episodes you're listening, the way it works is we have a live LinkedIn Audio studio recording every Thursday at 2 p.m. And then we really record it for those listening, as you are probably listening now, on Spotify and YouTube. Was very important to us, and thank you, everybody. Our subscribers are now over 30 on YouTube, over 1,000 views last week, getting medallions all over the place. So what's important to us is the subscribers. It also lets you know when the episode comes out, and we had some good ones. We had one on Dave Stevens 2 weeks ago. Last week we had on the IMB, and this week we are talking about Michael Zau. Was at the multifamily private office, I'll let him family office conference. And then we're talking about loan officer portability and the importance of it. We have some special guests today, John Jurkovich, as well as Laura Brandao, who will be on at about the 40-minute mark for those listening again on the podcast. So we're excited. But before we jump into loan officer portability, and I've been talking and really getting into this, so I am excited. I think, Michael, there's a couple items that we want to get into. So why don't we kick off? Tell us about another conference. People love to hear about conferences. How was it out there? And what's it like for, loan officers to learn if they wanted to maybe expand the deals they're doing?
Sure. Well, first off, the last week's conference that I went to was at the it was at the Waldorf Astoria. It was the family office conference, and what family office is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically wealthy families who now run an investment team to help manage their money in the space that, of course, that we're in the real estate space. These family offices will either buy mortgage-backed securities on maybe they're not doing $500 to $1 billion as they will on Wall Street, but they might buy $100 million pool, $50 million pool as a one-off, maybe several times a year. And so seeing the crowd that was there last week at the Waldorf was interesting because there was a lot of people that were connecting. A few actually new real estate funds, which I can't really talk about this week, but I know that we've had a few guests to show up on our show in the last few months to talk about some of the newer products that are going to be introduced into the retail space, the retail lending space.
And on that note, someone reached out to adopt the brand, so you'll actually see this new expansion of our branding, and we'll talk about the sponsors in a couple minutes because I think we want to come out of the gate strong here. But this person was talking about how just a year ago they were in New York visiting the hedge funds, the investors. Some you may know, some you may not know, and they are in the HELOC second mortgage space. And last year, it was trade, and even there's even a family office that he's going to be talking with that really wants to dig into this ability that once you build a consortium of liquidity, deals start flowing and expanding and new people enter the market. And what he said back to me, and why I've teamed up with Sandler Sales to help lenders help bring some sales. 104, 105, that's what he said. These same people he was visiting that were 102, these HELOCs and second mortgages are trading at 102, 104. Sorry, are trading at 104 and 105 now. As our secondary specialist, Michael, and that's just, one of the quick tidbits from around the league that I think I have here before we get out of the gates. Can you just explain to the average loan officer what that means and how that affects their world, or maybe for just a homeowner, what that means and why maybe they should call up, see if what that means for their equity?
Well, as we do know, it's been somewhat telegraphed that somewhere down the road we may see lower interest rates on the mortgage front when it comes to 30-year fixed rates. However, the overnight lending rate that the Federal Reserve has some connection to HELOCs because those are more variable in nature. And as the Federal Reserve begins to lower rates, reduce those rates, there is a margin attached because most home equity lines of credit are adjustable. those are going to be what they call a lagging effect. Meaning they're going to stay high until the loan adjusts. So some of the investors or the banks are going to be looking at that, going, hey, you know what? I'd rather get a few months of extra interest at the higher level than at the lower level, and so I'd like to be able to see what we can do about creating an opportunity for our originators to fund more HELOCs, especially for those who are not looking to sell, right? There's no interest rate lockdown, as Logan Motor Shout Me Out Housing Wire has indicated. However, for those that are just keeping their 2, 3, or 4% 30-year fixed rate, but still have credit card debt, we see a credit card debt increase in the United States over the last year. Those who want to just get a line of credit, even if it's at 12%, it's still lower than any credit card interest rate. Not only that, you have an amortization meaning over the course of time, that's going to reduce the amount of overall payment. So creating that for the clients that sit there and go, well, I don't want to do a $50,000 line of credit. Well, what if you had a $100,000 line of credit? Banks are now willing to pay 104 versus 102, meaning that if they had $100 million in that they're going to buy in HELOCs, they're willing to pay $104 million just so they can get that yield over a longer period of time, because they're not just going to be buying the yield. They're also going to be buying all the ancillary products that comes with the marketing behind it. So the car loans, the credit cards, and so on and so forth. CDs if they have savings. So I think that there's a big push right now for banks to go and extend out those HELOCs or lines of credits. Out here in California, there's a number of credit unions that we use outside of some of the other, not CompuSafe, but some of the other lines of credits that are out there. The credit unions are also competing with the broker space as well. So it's an opportunity for originators to say, you know what, I have an opportunity to not only get a client, but also increase my database and get referrals outside of that. If you can just think beyond that one transaction and get that line of credit, it's an opportunity for the originator to not only get the relationship on that line of credit, but also get all the referrals get attached to it. It looks like we're going to see another increase in housing units as far as buying units are concerned. So that line of credit expands your capacity, or that wide range net. I know when I was an originator at the retail space, I was able to really utilize that. If I had one client, I would turn that definitely into between 7 to 12 clients over the life of my relationship. So it's an opportunity for any originator to really expand upon that.
Yeah, and it goes with the theme, which we've been saying, and you'll hear us keep saying, and like this loan officer being a financial advisor, they're really not, they're not licensed to give stock advice, right? They don't really check in with much financial advice, maybe a 1-year review. And I think the HELOC is the perfect example. If you were giving monthly payment outflow advice, I think that would be a better role for a loan officer. Credit card rates go up, right? When the Fed puts their rate up, when the Fed puts their rate down, cuts it, credit card rates go down, HELOC goes down. So that's all intertwined. So you should be giving advice really on anything, say anything that has to do with the Fed. You'll hear from me. That's where I will help you, and it won't just be with mortgage. And that's where, we have some great listeners here. And so one of our listeners, Brian Vo, obviously a lot of LinkedIn knows him, but if you're on the podcast, maybe you don't listening. I thought he would make a great segue to our guest because of last week's episode. He was at the IMB with myself. He does believe in loan officer portability, which is where it's going. I don't know if you could raise your hand and come up, Brian. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but we do try to say to anybody in the audience that comes live here, we want you to come up. Our hope is for this to become more like a radio show than a podcast.
Yeah.
So we'd love to bring it up. Brian, thank you. I know you were going to meet with the legend Bill Dallas, so I know time, I almost feel like getting moved for that is a compliment to the show we've been doing in its own. I'm hitting allow to speak if anybody's wondering. And
by the way, he's raised his hand out in the audience, Michael, if you see it.
Yeah, I'm hitting allow to speak. It's just
technical difficulties. By the way, in football, as we approach the Super Bowl, they talk about coaching trees. And the way I would treat my referral trees in the past when it came to HELOCs is, you save somebody $300-400 off of credit cards, and now you can refer them to a financial advisor who can now invest an additional $400 to $500 a month potentially with an advisor, plus additional upfront if there was any cash out done on that refinance or the HELOC. Now, because the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, says that you're not allowed to take out home equity, or the advisor is not allowed to advise to take out home equity for investment purposes. But mortgage advisors, I'm going to say this gently, I hope, that certain mortgage advisors can provide some advice. Not everyone has the financial aptitude or the acumen to provide financial advice when it comes to making investments. But if there were an advisor that could educate the originator, then not only could you get more referrals potentially out of the financial advisor, but also the estate planning attorney, the CPA or tax advisor, and everyone that's affiliated, financially speaking, with that, as well as the realtor. And so when you work with the realtor, you get all those financial resources with you. It's just a huge opportunity to create more of a referral tree. But with that going down, thank you, Brian, for joining us. Good to see that. Good to see you again.
Technical difficulties. I was ignoring the big pop-up that said, allow LinkedIn access to your microphone.
And that's a good lesson for anybody who calls up. I mean, that will be, and we do want you to come LinkedIn audio, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on Thursday. So if you're listening again on YouTube or Spotify, that's how you get on this show. Brian, I can say things more raw, I guess, than others. So I'll say it so it doesn't have to be your words, but then you can comment on it. My report back from the IMB last week was I saw a lot of booths on AI, which I think is starting to really confuse people on what exactly it's dollars and cents. But there was a lot of that and then a lot of operational efficiency. I didn't see many booths on sales, anything sales related, like how to sell better, and that was one takeaway and I'm sure it's been that trend, but I was like, there is nobody here representing sales. And I think that was my takeaway for the IMB. And I do think it's not just at the lender level. Obviously, it's a great opportunity for loan officer portability. They couldn't afford to have their own kind of branded app in the past that is like, where all these Mint users can now come to you. And I think what they're missing is it's such a call to action to stay, top of mind. But while you're doing that, still make the phone call about what HELOCs are doing and credit cards. And so as we start to ask John, and I'm sure, popular LinkedIn crowd here, but that's what John's doing as well. What were your thoughts on the IMB conference? And then moving forward, whether it's an IMB or a broker, how do you see loan officers? And I know you're doing, maybe you could talk about your book, but that's kind of the same thing, right? And that was John's words, and really what your book's saying. So if you could help us with that segue, I think, lucky us.
John and I are neighbors here. We're not too far apart. So I always wanted to say, first time, long time, right? So I get to say that. And I was hoping I'd be able to do a first time, long time sports talk show here in Detroit about my Lions going to the Super Bowl, but they kind of let that go last Sunday. So we'll get beyond that.
The points.
I don't know, man. That's another show altogether. We could debate that for a while. So the IMB conference is one of my favorites. Although it's kind of going the way of a lot of conferences where it's seemingly more than greater than 50% of the attendees are non-IMBs. When it first started, I remember being at the very first one. It was like 90%. IMBs and 10%, the rest of us. And it's gone kind of, like I said, the way of most conferences. If I compare and contrast, last week's event in New Orleans with the MBA annual in October in Philly, the mood and the sentiment was markedly more positive last week and more optimistic than it was back in October. So that was very encouraging and refreshing. Definitely a lot of conversations around AI, people still trying to find ways to be more efficient and take out costs in their business, which makes a lot of sense. And to your point, Michael, at least around the sessions that I was able to participate in, and then the hallway outside the meeting rooms, not a lot of focus on what I'll call revenue producing, or revenue generating activities, i.e. sales.
Or a nice way to say, Brian, would be not many new entrants, right? He's like, no new entrants.
Yeah. And probably not too surprising because I don't know how many, I think if you're going to be a new entrant in that space, you're probably going to be showing up at events where those frontline sales generators are, those revenue producers are, where the loan officers are. But yeah, overall, very positive. And, I know you guys talked about this on a prior episode of, Bob Brooksmith, gave a very moving tribute to Dave Stevens, which kind of kicked things off. So but overall, it was very productive for what I was looking to get out of it. And folks that I talked to that attended kind of felt the same.
So, yeah, I thought it was a great conference, and the mood was great. And so I really didn't have much to critique about it, except going down memory lane a little bit. I think it's like Eric Gates just retired. It's almost like this whole group from 2013 to 2018 that was running in the Lenders One. They're just either not at the conferences anymore, or they're retiring, or and it's a little bit nostalgic in that area. But I thought it was a great conference. So moving forward, we have a lot of consolidation, which has a lot of movement. Oh, I'll give you guys another nugget. So I was at a state MBA event and yesterday, and so this stuff hasn't even hit MMI, or hasn't hit Ingenious, or hasn't hit iMergent, which had an amazing presentation at the IMB. The numbers in Massachusetts are 16,000 licensed loan officers last year. They're right about 10,800 NMLS after renewals. They'll get that into the system pretty soon. You're looking at, Michael did the math last night, what was it, about 40% reduction there?
Yeah, it's some crazy number from when you're reducing 16 to 10 or around that number. That's a pretty big drop. Lots of opportunity as rates come down because we have less originators, right?
Yeah. Then they said a lot of movement, over to the broker space, and then some people aren't qualified and some people are, but they're seeing a lot of people try. So with that said, Brian, you can help us, and just an honor to have you up here. Transition over to John. What have you learned about just loan officer branding in general from the book you're building, and what you're seeing out there as far as interactions go with your product?
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief because JJ's the man here. You want him on? He's loaded with knowledge and information. But the book that you referenced, Rethink Everything You Know About Being a Next Gen Loan Officer, is a collaboration that Kyle Draper and I have been working on. We have it started as a modest 10 chapter book, and nobody wants to read what I write, so we gather some smart people in the industry, and we're up to 38 contributors. These are folks that are in the trenches, either doing the work, they're originating loans. These are folks that are expert on things like personal branding. We have some expertise around capital markets, but a little different spin on it. And we have some mindset, experts as well. And when Kyle and I set out to do this, it was really around understanding that the next generation home buyer is changing rapidly right before our eyes, right? And what they're looking for and what's important to that next generation home buyer is different than the home buyer of 5 years ago. And so if you're a loan officer and you're still facing off to your community and to your market like you did 5 years ago, and you're going to end up missing the mark on this next group of, this next wave of first-time home buyers. And so our ask of our contributors was share insights and expertise and tips that loan officers can take from your chapter in the book that is going to help them be in a better position to face off with this next gen home buyer. We're not talking about young loan officers. We're talking about loan officers that are of all ages that are willing to learn new tips, new tricks that are going to, effectively, that are going to work and be effective in this market. And so we have 38 contributors. Like I said, the book is about...
One of those, Brian, as we segue over, but just to give the audience one, if you're a loan officer and you're listening and you want to do one thing to get better local and sort of be seen local in your town as the numero uno in the small neighborhood of the borough of Indiana or right outside Boston, what was one that stood out that like how you can become like the mayor of mortgages in your town?
Yeah, so it's all things personal branding, but it's personal branding and being visible, right? And so what does that mean? It's being willing to turn your camera on and talk into your camera and then share that with your community, whether it's virtual or live. And so we have like 5 or 6 chapters that talk about the power of video, the power of social, the power of personal branding. And I think each chapter has its own kind of takeaway, but when you package it all together, those 5 or 6 chapters alone are probably worth a book itself. And so I think it's going to reinforce for people that they need to be on video, they need to be on social, and they need to be active on those channels.
That's thank you, Brian. So it's perfect segue. Appreciate you listening and welcome up anytime. Tell Bill the show says hello, and we appreciate all he's done as a legend, and we mean that. John, given what you just heard, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Tell the audience real quick your background. I think that the fact that you not only have experience in coaching, but you can actually sell yourself. You've been doing it forever. People tune in to hear your advice. You're one of the most can do it and can back it up I've ever come across. So you have great sales ability. How do you coach people that, maybe aren't on your level? And then on top of all of that, they got to deal with this new generation of home buyers. What are loan officers supposed to do today? What did you come on here to if you could help 3 loan officers, how do you think you would help them?
Well, I think that, one, thanks for having me on. Truly a privilege. Following Brian there is awesome, and what they're doing over there at FinLocker is super cool. I've been doing this for 25 plus years. Started in the business like a lot of people as an accident. I have a degree in exercise physiology. I wanted to go and sell pharmaceuticals, and they told me I didn't have any sales experience. So I had to go get some. So one of my personal training clients happened to be in the mortgage space. Said, hey, we'll come and hire you, make a bunch of dials. And lo and behold, quickly ascended to one of the top people inside of that company. Was making 6 figures within, my first year, and really crushing it. Ended up doing a podcast type thing that used to go out on audio cassette with a guy named Dan Gilbert, right? Because I was this up and coming star inside of this company called Rock Financial. And went on to do a lot of great things there. Was on their executive team, which ultimately became Rocket Loan, or Rocket, whatever it is today. Test piloted a lot of things and learned from some really great people there. But that was an organization built, on a super strong sales background, great culture, and really just execution above all things. So I got an unfair advantage in the business working there through the years that I did, and then helped couple of companies, exit, do some different things, was in the private equity world, buying and selling notes. Have just done a little bit of everything, but have always fancied myself a salesperson first and foremost. So I like to call myself a sales athlete, and everything else comes off of that. The beautiful thing, though, about sales is a skill, and anything that's a skill can be taught. So you can be a terrible salesperson, and you can be taught sales. So not something like, you're 6'10", you can play basketball because you're 6'10". You don't have to be 6'10" to do sales. That was a lot of stuff there.
And it's not like speed. You can't teach speed, right? But can't teach.
You can't, correct, but I can definitely make you faster. So that's the whole thing, right? And a lot of what I do, 25 plus years working for companies, had launched a couple of very successful brokerages along the way. And about 6-8 months ago, I kind of got in a position where enough people had asked me to help them launch brokerages, asking me like fractional, like chief revenue officer type things. What should I do on lead buy? I got a lot of questions. I decided to make a business out of it, and went out and created a business called The Broker Builder. And our whole thing was we were going to take bankers and help them become brokers, right? So white glove service, everything from getting EIN numbers to GoDaddy to the whole 9 yards, licensing. And we started that. And like a lot of businesses or anything that you initially start, your plans today are probably different in 60 days, in that you morph, you learn, and really came to this understanding that as I'd interview people or talk to them about the success of them branching off and becoming their own entity, there was a gaping hole in that a lot of people, they've been doing loans for 10 years, 20 years, but they lack the personal brand. So it's very hard to go out and start your own business without a brand. They didn't have a personal brand. They had no database. They were really just reliant on their company to give them leads. So I identified kind of a massive hole in the market and have really been leaning into that now. And I like to say that I'm in the B2B business. I help bankers become better, and I help brokers become better. So doing a little bit of that, on both sides. But the great thing is I get to see a lot of people's struggles, where people are at. And our industry as a whole People like, if you have something that works, you like to like hide it from everybody. So I get to kind of see the things that are working. I give people some of the lessons without the scars, but I have definitely seen a lot here over the last couple of years about what people are doing, what works and what does not.
Yeah, there's way too many secrets in this industry that are stunting the growth of it. But you're finally seeing it come where a loan officer has the technology package that even 5-8 years ago they couldn't have. And I would think, years ago, if you wanted to become your own broker, you just needed a good logo, right? And you needed a name of your mortgage company that would show up early in the phone book, all about mortgages, AA, American, finance, whatever that may be. But now you definitely not only need the logo, you need that brand locally. People need to know how to find you, and then you probably need to relate to your past clients' kids now, and how do you deal with that? So my question would be, and I guess comment then question. So again, at this lunch yesterday, I'm on the board of the MMBA. We installed our new chairman, Ryan Hayes of Movement Mortgage, and the Division of Banks president spoke, and the leader of the CFPB up in our area, and they both spoke about how many people are applying to be mortgage brokers in Massachusetts. The number is overwhelming. It's the largest uptick of activity they've seen, and they're having a lot of conversations of saying no, and a lot of it is, like you said, they're 30-year veterans. Like, what do you mean I don't know how to run, or have a mortgage shop? And they're saying it's not that. It's you don't understand. You know compliance, but you don't understand the type of compliance that we're asking for. You understand financials, but we don't think you understand the type of financials that we are requiring for you to transact this way. So I do think there are a lot of loan officers that are, trying to become brokers. So, okay, so then you kind of have it in your ear. You want to become a broker. You get rejected for this reason. You're doing something else, but you're feeling entrepreneurial. You're feeling like the whole place is resetting. You got your own advisors, maybe an appraisal title rep, somebody like, encouraging you to go do your own thing. What comes first? Do you brand yourself up where you currently are, or do you make your move first, then brand? I'm sure you're hearing a lot of that kind of frozen decision-making.
Yeah. What you do is you start right where you're at with what you have today. And that's right. You'd ask for some pieces of advice. Start exactly where you were at. It doesn't matter where you're at in your journey. I have like a kind of a little time continuum, right? We all start, everybody in this industry starts as a brand new MLO that's just struggling to get their 70% on safe and figure out how the hell to sell one person, right? So like you're someplace between that continuum and Dan Gilbert, right? So you're between $0 a year and $70 billion in net worth. So the first thing that I tell people is evaluate right where you're at today. And let's say that the barrier to entry for you to go and become a broker, very rarely are people like, a good chunk of the people I talk to kind of fail out. I don't bring them on as clients. They're not ready yet. Very few of these people don't understand what an LTV is, writing a loan. They know that TRID needs 3 days. They have that kind of basic, like the loan writing part is actually the easy. Technology used to be a big barrier to entry, right? You go back, when you needed to have a BES server for your BlackBerry and you needed to spend $50,000 for Encompass. All those things now, these legacy systems, I think, are actually slowing down companies. A broker that goes online today with a, I don't know, name any CRM, with the lending pad integration that's plugged into Rocket, UWM, a couple of these brokers, can close loans a lot faster, better, cheaper than most of the companies that have been doing it for years. They have their warehouse lines, like they can just come in and operate really quickly. So the tech is no longer a barrier. The sales skills aren't a barrier, but it's really, where are you going to get your leads? What's your business going to look like? Compliance is a massive place. I can't tell you the number of clients that I bring on after they've opened a brokerage and we now are talking. They have not spoke to anybody on compliance. I've heard AI mentioned here a few times. It's great, but if you are going to rely on AI, keep you out of the sling, when you get an audit from North Carolina and you tell the auditor, well, I went to ChatGPT and I said, give it this, like you need to have a compliance person in your corner.
I'm going to the advocacy conference in March. I always go. This is like my 8th year. In out of the last 9, I believe in it. I think everybody in the industry should do it once. If you don't, I think you should figure out how. But because I'm from Massachusetts, get to meet with Elizabeth Warren. Now, she doesn't come every year. Actually, I think she only came to 2 of the years. But do you think I could send an AI bot instead of myself, or are you hinting that she probably wants to see real people and have real people accountable?
I think probably, right? AI is the big buzzword. Everything's AI now. Right? Actually, the internet is just AI. So if I just search something, I'm actually using AI. So everything that we're doing here is powered by AI. It's a joke, but everybody uses it as their catchphrase to get in there. But people are actually using it to write their entire compliance stack, right or wrong. So you need to go yourself. And that's another tidbit when you talk about, building a personal brand. Super important to be authentic and not try to do what everybody else is. There's great influencers in the space, but I think you're going to get further with you being you. Like, think about Joe Rogan, right? I mean, the guy believes in aliens, is a fighter, was on Fear Factor, yet runs like his unique combination is what makes him him. If he tried to be Jay Leno, like, nobody'd care about it. So you've got to be authentic, and people want to hear from an actual human being. And I'm seeing more and more salespeople actually having success going back to what they did in 2007 before they started pushing out a link. Here, fill out my application link, where they're actually doing live applications over the phone, collecting a social security number over the phone, talking about the income, talking about what they have in their 401k. Like, there is no plaid integration in sales today. It's real people selling real people, creating real authentic relationships.
That's amazing. So you're saying people actually get on the phone and talk human to human. That's a concept that I can get behind. And
John,
that was such a skill for loan officers for years. Sort of what made them not replaceable by technology was their ability to get on a phone and take somebody through a sales cycle or through a infrastructure like a Sandler sales system and have better conversion rates than others, certainly better than nonverbal. I think COVID, what's your opinion of this? I just think COVID and the abundancy model as well, everybody got a little, their knives of being able to sell became a little dull. And I also think everybody got obsessed with calling themselves a purchase-only shop. Problem with purchase-only is you're only as good as the inventory. And in my town right now, there are 2 listings on the market. That's not enough to feed the kids, right? So the refinance has dried up, not just because rates went up, but I think sales ability and going to people like you, John, or Sandler, has sort of lost its way. What do you think, sales coach and somebody that saw? Did you say Dan Gilbert only had 3 people he worked with before he became worth $50 billion?
No, he had hundreds of people, thousands of people that he's worked with.
No, but he started with 3, or he started.
Yeah, no, it was himself, his brother, and a couple of college buddies. I know they started. I mean, they started out the same way everybody else does. I posted something back on LinkedIn a while ago of my first, comp plan was on like a Ditto. You remember in middle school or elementary school? Mortgage industry's old, so people remember those Ditto machines where you'd go in, you crank off the thing, and they smelt funny. Like, my original comp plan came on like this weird thing that. Right? It was not the rocket mortgage that you think of today. It was a, hodgepodge together compensation plan. The benefits were terrible. Like, it was a small little company. There are hundreds, if not, there's tons of companies doing way more business than that company was doing when I started them. Jay Farner, right? He ran a mortgage in a box branch, division of that company. They were awesome salespeople, but there was the thing called the mortgage in a box, which was essentially a coloring book that people would fill out as an application, and then they'd mail them in, and then these guys would call them and sell them a loan. Jay Farner had like 12 guys, right? Like, everybody sees the end product, but they don't know where they came from to get there. And
what I would notice
with one like, everybody makes a video nobody watches. Everybody has a podcast that sucks. But nobody sees that.
What do you notice the difference right now, John, versus, I mean, you came around the business around the same time that I did. I came around in the mid-90s. I think I'm assuming you did around that time as well. And I noticed that those who came into business between 92 to 98, and there was a ton of mortgage brokers, but there was a lot of subprime mortgage companies and thrift and loans and so on and so forth at that time. And there was a certain amount of professional aggressiveness that was generated as a result. In other words, not only was it trying to go get as many clients as you can, doing 4 loans a month and so on and so forth out of that subprime industry genre, but also there was actually more originators that knew how to do more creative types of financing. And that's something I've really noticed that's kind of waned over the last 10 years. Is like before, it's like, well, if we'll figure out, instead of just doing stated income, we'll figure out how to create it so it can be a better stated income, pay on time type of borrower, and it'll perform. And at least the people that I was training under at the time back in the 90s, we wanted to see the best amount of performance possible. So that was part of the way we got compensated. That was kind of the old household finance model. So what do you see when you go and train the originator today, and or when you're talking to managers that are looking to recruit certain types of originators, depending upon how old they may be or how much experience they might have, are you talking about, hey, this is how the way it used to be, and you can learn some of these older tricks or older habits today because it's going to make you a better originator? And is that a part of what you're doing today? Because I noticed that it has waned. So I think it's something we can improve on as an industry as well.
100%. I mean, sales is a skill, right? I said that before. It's a lost art is really what it is today. And it happened right as the collapse happened and everything went to Fannie and Freddie. You no longer have this like large swath of programs where you could take stuff to. Like you go back to when you were getting in the business or when I did the late 90s, like you were taking stuff to like associates or wherever. You had to know the matrix. It didn't show up in your email. You had to know the matrix. You had to understand it. And I kind of like can look back at the times where sales skills started to drop. Like I remember doing FHA and VA IRRRLs on a piece of paper. I did a lot of handwritten 1003. Your processor had to put stuff in a file in a particular order. It got rejected, right? So you had all of these things that had to happen. And as soon as Fannie and Freddie launched, you guys been around a long time. You guys will remember EA1, EA2, and EA3.
Oh yeah.
And those, right? Like you haven't heard that in a long time, but that came in on the tail end of a lot of the subprime stuff going away. I now no longer needed to think. I put it into a system. I manipulated the numbers to get a finding, and I sold the finding. It no longer mattered, right? Like I didn't talk to clients about their 401k, about setting up a long-term retirement strategy because you're 50 with $5,000 in the bank. Like you don't want a 15-year mortgage because your employer matches 50 cents on the dollar. That all went away, and it went from selling people the best loan for them to qualifying. We all became Debbie the Time Life operator, and we were selling loans purely to qualify them. It was no longer, you weren't asking sales questions, you were asking qualifying questions. And that happened with the EA loans and that whole group of bankers that were great at subprime that could sell 15% with 4 points. And, you let them make it. They made $20,000 on the loan. But that group went away. And then it became more of, pushing pencils. And then you had, call centers and, just people that could do nothing other than sell.
That's a great point. I actually, I feel like it's something that I should have known for a long time, but what you said was we went from getting people to help them to just, hey, we're just getting them to qualify, right? And to take them from the crisis of what we experienced between 2008, 2012, let's just make sure that you qualify now that we no longer have stated income. We just want to make sure you qualify. And we've had a decade and a half of just getting people just to qualify instead of actually being the mortgage advisor. What is the best mortgage loan for you, right?
Yes,
I remember. So I think that's something that's missing right now. That's the missing piece. That's the elephant in the sales room, but needs to be championed. Actually, I think it needs to be championed. How do we produce a better homeowner so that they can make their payments on time? They can have the best product. Maybe they need to go do the FHA 2-1 just to get in. It's not date the rate, marry the house, but it really is. What can we do to help your finances today so you can have a better tomorrow instead of let's just make sure you qualify? And it gets people on that whole lie of you need 20% down or you need to avoid the MI because it doesn't help you. Well, if it gets you in, it helps you. So, there's a definite truth to that on a financial basis that is not being preached out. It is not being spoken to that we can definitely improve.
The whole fintech movement though, right, was do away with like fintech, right? That's all about qualifying the client. I wouldn't say all. But a lot of it, right? Like fancy POSs, fancy this. It's about qualifying the client with as little friction as possible. But that friction is where the education in lies. Talking to somebody about, we're really doing our clients a disservice. If we talk to a 55-year-old man or woman that has 10 grand in retirement and their employer matches 50 cents on the dollar, and we give them a 15-year mortgage to save them X number of years of interest, but the net result is that they can never retire, you're really giving them the wrong program. But my point of sale will spit it right out, will qualify, and we never have that conversation anymore. It'd be like if we went in and started, somebody wants to lose 20 pounds, I'd look at them and say, well, if I chop you off just below the knee, you got a pretty big ankle and calf, I think that's 20 pounds, right? You accomplished the goal, but maybe not what's best. Super bullish on it. I love the fact of where things are going. Just got done with a call about all the FCC changes. And if you've been a pusher of, right, you're pushing links and using tech and not selling and not building a brand, and you're buying regenerated leads and you're doing all those things, the next 12 to 18 months is going to be pretty hard for you. If you're out building a local brand, becoming a trusted authority, you're doing stuff with your, local businesses, you're promoting them, you're linking in Facebook, you're doing all of those things to create a personal brand, these clients are going to come to you, right? They're going to love you. You're going to go to your kid's football game and they're going to be like, hey, there's, the mortgage guy. And your business is becoming bulletproof, and it's going to be harder and harder for all those other people. So I'm super bullish on the people that are getting into the space today, doing the right things today. So in 12, 13, 14 months, they're going to be, kicking butt. And other people are going to be like, oh crap, what happened? I can't get my, my regenerated leads that I'm, spamming them and texting them and all that. So it's a cool market right now. There's a lot of change, but I think Darwin said, it's not the strongest that survive. It's the ones that can best adapt to change. And, we're seeing it.
I was going to ask a question for you to hit the grand slam at the end, but that was a real drop the mic moment. And we want to remind that we do tape in front of a live audience on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. If you're listening to us, which the majority of you are on Spotify and YouTube, please subscribe so you get the releases on Sundays. And please, if you are a consumer, which this is going out to more and more of, even though our target's typically the loan officers and mortgage leaders, a lot of consumers are starting to listen. It's what you just heard from John that shows that this show's raw. And it also is caring. And the people that you have on here will be people that are caring about you as a consumer. So please ask any question you want. We'll look back at the episode and try and bring on the person we think you were talking about to ask it, or invite you on the show to ask it. But that was perfect, John. Real quick, a little housekeeping. Just some of the sponsors of this program and what Adopt the Brand does as it helps from a fractional sales and marketing, especially partners of lenders, reach CEOs at lenders, but Silverworks Solutions, and the only persona-based bot company in the industry. Because everybody is trying to get there, it's super unique and a great opportunity for us, as well as Velic Valuations, which is, if you don't, I heard it at the IMB, you don't want to be coming to the rainstorm with a thimble. You need that bucket. So when it rains, it doesn't hurt now to look into title. And in this case, make sure your appraisal bench is diversified, because when rates do go down, there will be a log jam again. And it's going to be crazy that people didn't give one or two deals to work that bench out today. So do you want to give a quick, for our family office, Michael, just a quick mention?
Of course, with our family office providing bridge loan financing on the commercial space here, also specializing in reverse 1031 exchanges, not the forward that everyone's familiar with. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. We are in the market for purchasing and not necessarily originating commercial mortgage notes.
Okay, so with that said, for all of our listeners out there on Spotify and YouTube, I said you'd have this in at the 40-minute mark. We're a little bit behind, so but we appreciate you all being patient, and maybe we can go over a minute or two here so that it is on our show as well. But Laura, thank you for coming up on the show and giving our audience, and you were also a great transition like we had earlier in the show, where our last episode was about the IMB conference. You were at the IMB conference, but our show today is about loan officer portability and just brand in general, and the new generation of loan officers and what the opportunities are. So I think nobody's more qualified to speak on it. And the good news is you always speak with such passion and optimism. So I think everybody's excited to hear it. here and virtually in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to the conversation. I have to tell you, gentlemen, I was enjoying the conversation that you were having. It was kind of taking me back to the days of, getting our faxes from many, many different lenders in the industry, and definitely needing to know those guidelines and needing to understand, based on the parameters of the financial situation of that consumer and borrower, who was the best loan program for them. So love that discussion, and, transitioning right into the branding side. It's fascinating to me that I was just interviewing someone yesterday for my podcast, and we were having a conversation about relationships, and kind of similar to what you were stating in regards to knowing your background of your loan programs. We were also saying that we've noticed that when you had a Rolodex, so to speak, going way old school, you had to work that down to knowing every single detail about that particular family or that relationship. And over time, as much as everything has been getting into technology and perfecting it, we've actually moved away from establishing those long-standing relationships. And what you were saying, totally, you have to have, I like to call it being local famous, right? Every single originator out there should be local famous in their market, that when they go to the supermarket, everybody goes, that's John. That's John, the mortgage guy. And he's the guy that knows everything about the neighborhood, knows about the schools, knows about the best loan program. He's the guy I go to for advice. My daughter's getting married. She's looking to buy a home. I don't even think about going on Google or going into anywhere. I'm just looking up information because John is the guy. Every single originator and mortgage professional out there should be the guy or the gal expert within their local market. And it's easier now than ever before, because we can have that local podcast. We can show up. We can be on social media. We can be there to celebrate every change that is happening within our community more than we ever could before. So if we're not doing that in an authentic and an original and unique way that it's tied to us personally, we are completely being a disadvantage to our communities. We owe that.
I totally agree. I when I was originating, I remember I did the supermarket ad, I did the local newspaper ad in the regional newspaper. It's only like into 1 or 2 zip codes. I'm in San Diego, so it's a pretty big county. Yeah, and then the co-branding with certain realtors, certain financial advisors on their advertisements, on their mailers. And then all that actually wasn't necessarily to make the phone ring directly. All that was so that I would get more recognition, more referrals, and more referral sources. And I think that sometimes we lose track of what it is that social media has accomplished. It's great that you can get followers. It's great that you can get people to comment and so on and so forth. But ultimately, we're doing that so we can make the phone ring. And then even more importantly, the type of marketing that we do, it brings recognition to the salesperson or to the company. And I think some social media outlets, I don't know, influencers, I'll call them, they've kind of lost track. They've gotten into some of the craziness, but don't necessarily. There's a few originators that are really good at it and do originate mortgage loans, but I think we've lost track to what the branding and the marketing actually is supposed to accomplish.
Exactly.
So, Laura, what is it that you think that the IMB should be doing today then, as far as a company versus the originator, so they can brand themselves to be a better IMB, so that they can bring in originators, so the originator can say, you know what, they're branding themselves properly, social media wise and regionally speaking, so that I want to actually brand with them as well. I think that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'll even use our company, EPM, as an example, right? So as an example for us, you're not going to see things about necessarily loan programs. You're going to see our culture. You're going to see who we are, what our beliefs are, and what we're trying to do as our mission for the entire community and fulfilling the American dream. right? So it's really, who are you as that IMB? What is your messaging? Because sure, if you go out and you say, well, I have the best rates and the fastest service, well, you better have those things, right? I mean, that's not a brand. That's not differentiating you from anywhere else, right? What is that differentiator, and what is that value proposition to the originator to make you want to bond with them? It's the same as our borrowers and families we're serving. We all go back to that basic, you do business with people you know, like, and trust. So what is that message that you want for originators to say, I'm home, right? I'm home. This company provides the same thought process that I do, that I want to serve my market, my communities, my families. I'm proud to wear their branding.
Can I add one thing really quick there?
Of course.
It's super important. If I'm an IMB and I'm trying to recruit key talent, me having a great brand provides those people that are maybe a little bit timid or scared to do it. You provide them air cover of something that they can forward and begin a conversation in their own community. If you're not doing it, you're not setting them up to win. So you've got to be doing it just to support your people with a brand to share.
Correct.
Laura, we will provide a link in the comments section of the Spotify and YouTube podcast when this comes out to your podcast, because yours is so uplifting and it has a cadence to it that's easy to follow as you start to listen to them. But I think that's another piece here. So loan officers, all of us really in this industry, had to face a tough 2023, and I think everybody's looking at the Fed and rates in 2024. But when you talk to them, everybody loves to say, I'm purchase only, I'm going for purchase referral sources, but they're all using the same software now. Everybody's caught up where they all know how many deals each realtor's doing, who they're giving them to. Yes, on our show, we're revealing that. But I still think, and we talk a lot about the home, the P&L, and if rates have gone up, that means credit cards have gone up, starting out or moving maybe companies now or changing channels. What do you see as the fertile, assuming that no inventory comes to the market for a little while, but rates get better, where do you think somebody should focus on as their brand locally?
But that's the thing, is I don't think it's one thing, right? So Michael just said when he was an originator, he was on the supermarket cart, and he was in the newspaper, and he was wherever, right? I think that scientifically they say that it takes us 7 times to have something become familiar to us, okay? Meaning that maybe the first time you see someone, you're like, okay, that person's all right. And then the second time you're like, oh, look, it's that person again. And then the third time it sinks in a little. So if I was going to say anything about branding, anything out there for anyone that's doing something today, the word that I need you to remember is consistency. I don't really care if you're speaking about veterans, first-time home buyers, single moms, the Hispanic market, renovation loans, reverse, bridge loans. It doesn't matter what you're saying. Just be consistent in the fact that letting people see you, become the authority, become known, when I use the word influencer, it's not an influencer like the million views on or followers on TikTok. The influencer is, this person is an authority that I trust what they're saying. I believe in them because, man, they show up all the time. I see them here. I see them there. I see them another place. Look, they're speaking. They're doing a podcast. They're in the local market here. Wow, now they're speaking about VA loans. Now they're speaking about jumbo loans. Now, wow, they also know about construction. This person must really know their craft. So consistency would be my answer.
And we are proud on this show. We have done it every Thursday live since early June, maybe late May. Only Thanksgiving did we not air. And I think we've now been at 12 different conferences in 12 different states and still found a way to pull it off. And it works. I mean, when I showed up at the IMB, I think everybody knew about the show, whether they've seen it, watch it, or just listen to the podcast. Every single person has at least seen the reel, these mic drops. They watch those that we do after the show with a lot of editing, and that's where We're always looking for clients. I guess one final question as we go a little bit into running time here. What I find fascinating, Laura, because I am very passionate and involved in the industry, especially on LinkedIn. So if you did something on LinkedIn, I have a way of remembering it. I think your story is very special. We'll also do a link to, if you want to know about Laura and her amazing journey, there's a Lickin' on Lending from 2019 we'll put in the comment section. But what I remember also about you, Laura, is like you didn't like to get in front of the camera. You were actually almost backed out of your first like real speaking at the local state level, but because you give so much to the New Jersey MBA, you said, I'll do it. And then really since then, you just led the peer breakout at the IMB, which is like no big deal for you because they ask you to speak everywhere. Plus you now have your own show. Plus where you interview people. Plus you did the Monday motivations and you stuck consistently with it. I think you're the story more of where you went or, getting to the top. I think the story more is about that consistency. Can you just talk about how one day you wake up and it becomes a lot less comfortable to do the camera and then it becomes a lot less uncomfortable to get on stage and just like how every journey starts with one step, I guess?
You are correct. And I have to be honest, my journey started with realizing that I needed to use my voice in order to encourage other people to use theirs. So when I got out of my own way and took myself out of it to where it wasn't about me, it was about me inspiring someone else to recognize that your voice doesn't have to sound the same. I do not sound like Michael or John right now, okay? Nothing I say, nothing I do, or anything that happens right now will be similar to anything you three say. To some people, that's scary because when you have to be yourself, you have to put yourself in front and possibly be criticized, possibly have the thought in your mind that you don't belong, you don't have anything to share of value, and that maybe you're not supposed to be there. But when I got up on that stage that first time, and I had a line of, in my situation, it was women that said, we don't see women executives in the mortgage industry on stage. And I said, okay, this is no longer about me. This is me being a beacon of light for others, regardless of who they are. It's not about women, but regardless of who they are, if I can do it, you can do it. And do it your own unique way. Because you're the best you will ever be.
That's awesome. I love it because, Laura, what you're telling people is that in order for someone to be the best version of themselves, they allow yourself to see yourself in the future, be the best version of yourself in the future, and then use that as your beacon of light to look forward. So instead of using the past to dictate your future, use your future to dictate your future.
Exactly.
Michael, we're coming across on the top of the hour here, and that means that we're coming to a close.
Yeah, and so I guess, we don't want to leave without any warning. I always love the idea that our audience is growing, not just in the lending, that's sort of the target, but consumers out there and just the general public. Any final, I think John did a very good one there, but any final thoughts, Laura, for somebody that is a future homeowner or a future parent of a homeowner? What would be the same type of message you have for that person about American home ownership and the future of it?
I don't think it matters what year it is. Meaning whether we were having this conversation in the year 2000 or we're having this conversation in 2024. Everyone that has that moment when you decide that it's time to look for a home or become a homeowner, or, you want to guide your child to it, it's scary. It's overwhelming. You're thinking that it's not for you or it's not the right time. And remember what I said, it doesn't matter what year, okay? Take away any limitations that you hear on the news or anything that you hear in discussions, because change the information. There's always challenges, regardless of what cycle we're in. When it's your time, get with a trusted mortgage advisor that can guide you and listen to you and ask all the important questions, because as John had said, it's all in the more information that we have as mortgage professionals, the better we can guide. Don't be afraid. It's the greatest investment anyone will ever make in their lifetime. So now is the time, as long as that mortgage advisor says, yep, we're all good to go, we can get you into that home. Don't let fear hold you back.
And listen to us as you go along the journey, because these great guests really do care about the industry, and therefore they care about you and making sure you get with somebody that represents the industry the right way. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, John. Michael, always great to co-host with you. Another week in the books. They can't get ahead of us if we don't miss a beat. So another great episode of MoreTalk. And if you're listening again on Spotify or YouTube, tune in on LinkedIn Audio to be a participant, because this really is going to eventually be a radio type show.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, John. We appreciate you guys.